Welcome to the Bayer Vegetation Management Stewardship Learning Series. This module will focus on handling, storing, and transporting herbicides. In this module, we will discuss stewardship best practices related to the handling of herbicides, herbicide storage, and herbicide transportation. Note that this training module focuses on stewardship training and awareness for the handling, storage, and transportation of registered herbicides under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, or FIFRA. It is not meant to cover other relevant compliance areas under OSHA, DOT, or other applicable federal, tribal, state, or local laws and regulations with respect to the handling, storage, and transportation of herbicides. It is important to remember when it comes to all matters relating to herbicide products, the herbicide product label is the law. Reading, understanding, and abiding by the entire label will allow all people who come into contact with herbicides to be in compliance with the law and the legally approved uses of the product by making sure you are aware of the directions for use, restrictions, precautions, proper personal protective equipment or PPE, and potential human and environmental hazards described on the label. There are also important phone numbers that you should familiarize yourself with. If you have any questions about the label, you should contact your manufacturer before handling or using the product. Today, we will focus on 3 areas critical to effective stewardship: making worker protection a priority, taking care of application equipment, and being aware of and abiding by government regulations. We will discuss each of these in detail now. The Worker Protection Standard, or WPS, is important to understand when discussing the subject of worker protection. The WPS are regulations imposed on employers and are designed to protect employees from occupational exposure to herbicides. Topics covered in WPS include herbicide safety training for employees, notification of herbicide application and restricted entry intervals, use of personal protective equipment, and how to provide decontamination supplies and emergency medical assistance to employees. Note that not all products are covered under the WPS. However, you should check for a WPS clause on the product label before handling a herbicide. For more detailed information on worker protection standards, visit the EPA website listed here. When mixing, loading, transporting, and applying herbicides, you need to wear the appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE. PPE is designed to protect handlers from the hazards of the chemical components used in the products. Handlers of herbicide products are defined in the WPS as people who are working with open herbicide containers. Those handling unopened herbicide containers or cases are not considered handlers. For more information on who are considered herbicide handlers, see the document from the EPA in the attachments area of this module. The product's label will include a detailed list of the items herbicide handlers are required to wear based on the toxicity of the product. Review and follow the PPE requirements on the label before handling the product. Personal protective equipment is used to reduce possible exposure to herbicides. In addition to using the required PPE, certain worker protection recommendations should also be followed. Remove PPE as soon as possible and wash your skin thoroughly to remove possible residue after you have finished handling products and cleaned all equipment. When removing gloves, wash the outside of them before removing. Wash your hands before eating, drinking, chewing tobacco, or using the toilet. And finally, it is important to wash clothing worn during contact with herbicides separately from other laundry, so that any herbicide residues that may be on your clothes do not contaminate other clothing. In addition to using the required PPE, it is critical that all employees know how to respond in the case of an emergency. We will touch on a few key tips to consider pertaining to worker wellness and protection. First, be sure to establish an emergency response plan, or ERP, and post emergency contact information in high-traffic or clearly visible locations. Additionally, make sure you have the necessary first aid and decontamination equipment as required by the WPS, as well as chemical absorption material and spill containment items, such as containment drums, to handle accidental leaks and spills. And finally, make sure all appropriate employees and coworkers are trained and know how to respond in the case of emergency. There are many tools and resources available to help employers prepare for an emergency. One such resource is the Pesticides and Planning for Emergencies document from the Purdue University Cooperative Extension Service, found in the attachments or the link on the screen. Proper equipment inspection and maintenance are critical for helping to ensure that herbicides are handled properly. Here are some important factors to consider related to application equipment. First, before using any application or storage equipment, be sure to check for leaks, cracks, or clogs and make the necessary repairs or replace worn or damaged parts before attempting to use the equipment. Pay close attention to sprayer hoses and connections. Additionally, make sure you wash all spray equipment, respirators, and other application equipment after each use to avoid unintentional mixing of products and the accumulation of chemical residue. And finally, when application equipment is not being used, be sure this equipment is kept in areas away from children and animals. Herbicides are regulated at the federal, tribal, state, and local levels of government, and these regulations are constantly evolving. Whenever you are working with herbicides, proper stewardship requires that you always be aware of and follow government regulations. Pay particular attention to applicator certification and recertification requirements, as well as special permitting and application record requirements in the areas where you are operating. Now let's turn our attention to stewardship as it relates to storing herbicide products. The first important step is to inspect all herbicide packaging immediately upon receipt of a herbicide. When inspecting a delivery, there are 4 key items you should look for. 1. Leaking containers. 2. Broken boxes. 3. Improperly sealed containers. And 4. Missing product labels. If you see any damage to containers or missing or incomplete labels, contact the manufacturer or shipping company immediately. Do not use the product in a damaged container without first contacting representatives from the manufacturer or shipping company. Requirements for herbicide storage can vary based on the volume and type of product being stored. It is your responsibility to know and follow all herbicide storage requirements. Check your state agency to identify storage requirements for packaged and bulk products. Remember that the label contains storage information in the storage and disposal section, so be sure to read, understand, and follow the label instructions as they relate to storage of that particular product. In addition to the label, the Safety Data Sheet, SDS, provides additional information on herbicides. Similar to labels, safety data sheets for most herbicides are available online through the manufacturer or CDMS. There are a variety of options based on the amount and type of herbicides you have on site when deciding on the proper location to store herbicides. For large quantities of herbicides, consider utilizing a building designed specifically for herbicide storage. If you are storing only moderate amounts of herbicide, a room or storage cabinet within an existing building may be appropriate. Consider choosing a location that has a door which opens to the outside. Avoid using an area near a body of water or where flooding is likely to occur, and think about how emergency vehicles can easily access your storage facility if necessary. Finally, always consider local building, zoning, and fire codes as well as environmental regulations. There are many variables of a storage facility that can impact the effectiveness of your herbicides, including temperature, humidity, and ventilation. Storage directions on the label typically require herbicides be stored inside, in a cool, dry location. The label should indicate the acceptable range of temperatures that will keep the herbicide from freezing or prevent an explosion due to excessive heat. If dry herbicides are stored in a humid area, these formulations may clump or dissolve, and paper and cardboard containers can weaken. Humidity can also cause metal containers to rust and labels to peel off or become unreadable. Further, proper ventilation in the storage facility can limit employee exposure to toxic fumes and limit the potential of fire and explosions. And remember, adequate lighting allows employees to read herbicide labels more easily. Finally, consider the following steps regarding your storage facility. Lock the facility and restrict access to authorized employees. By doing this, only properly trained personnel are able to access the herbicides. Equip the storage location with emergency response materials, first aid kits, and appropriate emergency contact information. Certain states have laws and requirements related to signage for herbicide storage facilities. Keep an up-to-date written inventory of all herbicides in a facility. In addition to helping estimate future product needs, some states have regulations requiring inventory record keeping. You may also want to keep a duplicate copy of all inventory off the premises. Cooperate and exchange information about your facility and inventory with local fire departments and proper authorities. There are a variety of tools available online to help you evaluate your storage facility, both from government websites and university extension services. Examples of 2 useful tools are listed here. At this point, we will discuss stewardship as it relates to product transportation. Careful transportation of herbicides is very important to avoid accidents that could happen even during short trips. Accidents that happen while transporting herbicides can have adverse effects to both human health and the environment. Proper stewardship requires that workers exercise caution when loading, transporting, and unloading herbicides. Federal, tribal, state, and local regulations have been established to govern the safe transportation of herbicides. These requirements can vary based on the type of herbicide, amount, concentration, and distance transported. Although we will touch on them here, we encourage you to refer to the links provided to help understand the full requirements for transportation of your specific herbicide. Additionally, the safety data sheet may contain shipping and transport information that may be useful to you. Full compliance with the U.S. Department of Transportation regulations related to the transportation of herbicides includes but is not limited to the following: carrying shipping papers, which include emergency response telephone numbers and safety data sheets, SDS, for the herbicides in transport. Receiving training related to hazardous material regulatory requirements as administered by the Department of Transportation. Ensuring that packages are properly labeled and marked. Obtaining a commercial driver's license where required. And for vehicles transporting large quantities of product, applying the appropriate placarding on the vehicle based on the volumes being transported. There are a series of steps you can take to minimize the chance of an accident or spill when loading and unloading herbicide containers onto your vehicle in preparation for transport. First, before loading herbicides, always perform an inspection of the vehicle to ensure the vehicle is in sound mechanical condition, the fluid and tire pressure are at the appropriate levels, and that placarding is affixed to the vehicle as indicated by federal, tribal, state, and local regulations. Also, make sure that anything in the cargo area that could damage or puncture containers is removed, and consider using a synthetic liner or tarp in case any materials spill while in transport. Second, thoroughly inspect all containers to ensure the label is legible and securely attached to the containers. Be sure to check all caps and plugs and tighten them if necessary. If leakage has occurred, ask for another container. Third, use caution when loading the containers. Do not drop or slide containers over rough surfaces. Fourth, position containers so that the lids or caps are facing up and product labels are visible. And finally, take particular care to secure all containers to the vehicle to prevent load shifts as well as prevent theft or tampering. Load shifts could cause leaks or spills as well as damage to containers. Next, we will offer a few suggestions to encourage safe driving while transporting herbicides. First, be sure all employees who will be transporting herbicides have completed driver training and are familiar with the safety functions of vehicles they will be driving. Second, require seatbelt use by all drivers and passengers in a vehicle and consider restrictions on electronics, including cellular phone use while driving. Third, make sure all employees and coworkers are aware of what steps need to be taken in case of an accident or chemical spill. In summary, let's review some of the key messages from this module. First, and most importantly, remember that the label is the law. The label contains the legally approved use, handling, and storage instructions that must be followed. Second, proper stewardship in the handling of herbicides includes, but is not limited to, wearing the appropriate personal protective equipment, having and communicating an emergency response plan, as well as ensuring that all equipment used is in good working condition. Third, storage decisions should consider temperature, humidity, ventilation, and security and must be guided by regulations. And finally, when transporting herbicides, it is critical that vehicles, operators, and herbicide containers are in compliance with federal, tribal, state, and local regulations and understand the importance of safety as it relates to defensive driving as well as loading and unloading herbicides. Remember, in this training module, we focused on stewardship training and awareness for the handling, storage, and transportation of registered herbicides under FIFRA. It is not meant to cover other relevant compliance areas under OSHA, DOT, or other applicable federal, tribal, state, or local laws and regulations with respect to the handling, storage, and transportation of herbicides. Congratulations, you have completed this learning module on handling, storing, and transporting herbicides. Please answer the following questions to confirm your understanding of the material we discussed.